The third meeting of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security. Can I first remind everyone to silence your mobile phones? Let me also remind anyone who plans to speak from a prepared text to please provide that text to the Secretariat, if at all possible, so that our interpreters will have an easier time. Also, I've been asked by the interpreters that if you could speak slowly and clearly, they would certainly appreciate it. Colleagues, the agenda of this meeting has been circulated. This afternoon, we'll start on the consideration of our supplementary items. Could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections to the agenda? Seeing not, the agenda is adopted. Thank you. We will now consider the draft resolution on supplementary item number 6, clarifying the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine in terms of adherence to the OSCE principles, sponsored by Dr. Daniela de Ritter. I'd be grateful if you can help us organize our debate by registering any interventions for the debate as soon as possible. I would now like to give the floor to the sponsor of this supplementary item, Dr. Daniela de Ritter from Germany. Dr. de Ritter, you have the floor.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Der Antrag, der Supplementary Item, der Ihnen vorliegt, ist Ausdruck meiner Tätigkeit als Sonderbeauftragte für Osteuropa. Zu Osteuropa gehören die Länder Ukraine, Belarus und die Republik Moldau. Mir ging es darum, und ich danke hier auch für die Unterstützung der Kolleginnen und Kollegen, die sich an diesem Antrag und an den Ergänzungen beteiligt haben, noch einmal deutlich zu machen, dass wenn wir den Aggressionskrieg Russlands gegen die Ukraine aufs Schärfste verurteilen, dies auch in der Tat konkrete Konsequenzen haben muss, zu denen wir uns bekennen müssen. Wir verurteilen diesen Krieg auf das Schärfste und meinen damit aber auch, dass wir die Zivilgesellschaft unterstützen müssen, dass wir Frauen und Männer, die Opfer dieses Krieges geworden sind, auch unterstützen müssen und uns solidarisch erklären müssen. Dies bedeutet gleichzeitig aber auch, dass wir das Aggressionsverhalten Russlands ächten müssen und die Menschenrechtsvergehen, die geschehen sind, auf das Schärfste nicht nur moralisch verurteilen müssen, sondern auch juristisch. Mir ging es auch noch einmal darum, das Verhalten Belarus als Co-Aggressor in den Fokus zu stellen und deutlich zu machen, dass ein solches Solidaritätsverhalten mit Russland etwas ist, was wir ebenfalls ächten müssen, weil es gegen die Grundprinzipien, für die OSZE und ihre Parlamentarierversammlung im Sinne der Vereinten Nationen und im Sinne der Pariser Charta nicht entspricht. Solidarität mit der Ukraine an dieser Stelle bedeutet aber auch, den Blick auf die Nachbarländer und insbesondere auf die Republik Moldau zu wenden. Dieses kleine Land, das selber zu einem der ärmsten in Europa, auf dem europäischen Kontinent gehört, hat sich in einer großen Solidarität der Flüchtlinge aus der Ukraine angenommen. Und wir hatten selber Gelegenheit, mit dem Ad-Hoc-Committee of Migration einen Besuch in Moldau zu machen. Und dafür möchte ich dem Staff der OSZE-PV ganz herzlich danken, dass wir die Gelegenheit hatten. Und das gehört ja auch zu unseren Schlüsselaufgaben, hier auch Solidarität dadurch zu bekunden, dass wir in diese Länder reisen und uns mit ihnen solidarisieren und deutlich machen, wie wichtig die Arbeit vor Ort ist. Russland schreckt nicht davor zurück, auch Kinder mit zu beschädigen, nicht nur Frauen, nicht nur Männer, die im Krieg sind. Und deshalb ist es ganz besonders wichtig, dass wir dieses Verhalten ächten und deutlich machen, wo die Grenzen sind. Aber gleichzeitig auch unsere Hoffnung Ausdruck verleihen, dem Optimismus das Wort zu geben, dass dieser Krieg eines Tages zu Ende sein wird. Aber auch dafür die Bedingungen deutlich zu machen, unter denen dieses zu akzeptieren ist. Ich wiederhole noch mal, was ich bereits bei vorherigen Tagungen gesagt habe. Wenn die Ukraine den Krieg beendet, dann hat sie ihr Existenzrecht verwirkt bei einem derart aggressiven Nachbarstaat. Wenn aber Russland den Krieg beendet, dann hört er auf und dann gibt es wieder Hoffnung auf ein friedliches Miteinander. Der Supplementary Item, der Ihnen, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, heute vorliegt, hat genau dieses zum Gegenstand. Und ich freue mich, dass wir das heute hier debattieren können. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. The speeches in this debate, we're going to set at 3 minutes time limit. I may need to reduce the speaking time to accommodate additional speakers, depending on how that develops. The floor is now open for debate. I will give the floor to Mr. Mikita Potorayev, the head of delegation from Ukraine. Sir, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I guess that we have to support all supplementary items that are proposed because they all are important for peace and stability in Europe, concretely in our region. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Francesca Sorbara from Canada. Sir, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Pleasure to meet you earlier on today. Dear colleagues, I'm pleased to support the supplementary item on the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. I would like to begin by thanking Ms. De Ritter for bringing forward this item, which I fully support. I would also like to thank the Ukrainian parliamentary delegation here in Vancouver for your leadership and advocacy on behalf of your people. Canada stands in full support of Ukraine and its territorial integrity and sovereignty and for the full democratic rights of all Ukrainians. We salute you and the Ukrainian people for your brave resistance to Russia's barbaric aggression. Russia's war against Ukraine, a war in which Belarus is complicit, is a flagrant abuse of the fundamental rules of international law and a violation of Russia's OSCE obligations. More than 16 months of Russian aggression has resulted in thousands of deaths, the displacement of millions, and extensive destruction of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure and economy. Most appallingly, as the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine has documented, Russian troops and authorities have engaged in systemic human rights violations in Ukraine, including the execution and torture of prisoners of war and civilians, the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, and the forced deportation of Ukrainian children. The number of atrocities is too long to list. As an OSCE community and as parliamentarians, we must do everything in our power to protect the civilian populations in Ukraine and hold Russia accountable for its heinous crimes. Canada was among a group of countries that referred the situation in Ukraine to the International Criminal Court, the ICC, in relation to international crimes committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. And Canada fully supports the ICC's decision to issue arrest warrants for President Putin, as well as Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights for the war crime of the unlawful deportation of children. As Ms. De Ritter's SI asserts, our resolve in supporting Ukraine must be unwavering. This means continuing to provide the financial, humanitarian, diplomatic, and military support that Ukraine requires to mitigate the consequences of Russia's aggression and exert its right of self-defense. And of course, we must stand ready to ensure that Ukraine has the support it needs to repair its critical infrastructure and to rebuild its economy. The OSCE participating states should also look for opportunities to play a diplomatic role in Ukraine. As Ms. De Ritter SI indicates, this includes supporting efforts to ensure nuclear safety and protection in Ukraine and encouraging the expansion and extension of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Finally, the OSCE and the OSCE should support diplomatic pathways between the parties when they contribute to respect for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Ultimately, Russia started this war and has the power to end it today. It is critical that we remind Russia of this fact and use every tool at our disposal to bring an immediate end to this war. I urge you all to support this supplementary item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Andrew Gwynn from the United Kingdom, to be followed by Mr. Joe Giglio from Malta. Mr. Gwynn, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to begin by thanking Ms. De Ritter for sponsoring this item, and I'm proud to speak as a representative of the United Kingdom delegation in support of supplementary item 6, clarifying the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine in terms of adherence to OSCE principles. This item sets out the ways in which Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine clearly breaches both the Charter of Paris for a New Europe and the United Nations Charter. The very first guideline of the Paris Charter, and I quote, emphasises the irrevocability of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The second guideline sets out the importance of protecting the independence, sovereign equality, or territorial integrity of participating states. The UN Charter is similarly unequivocal. The preamble reaffirms faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of human person, as well as respect for international law. Mr. Chair, these are non-negotiable principles that all OSCE members are expected to abide by. The Russian Federation, a founding member of the OSCE and its predecessor, the CSCE, has taken a torch to the international rules-based system and thereby proven it does not recognise the principles of the OSCE. Ukrainian men, women and children have been cut down in the streets, cities reduced to ash, all in an attempt to break the Ukrainian people. In that respect, Russia's invasion has been an abject failure. I'm sure I speak for most in this room when I say that spirit and the bravery of the Ukrainian people has been nothing short of astounding. Every single day they are fighting to protect their freedom, their democracy and their rights to sovereignty. We then, as OSCE members, owe it to our Ukrainian friends to stand alongside them, to make it clear unequivocally that Russia's aggression will not be tolerated and that there are consequences, diplomatic, financial and strategic, to the course the Kremlin has decided to take. We in the United Kingdom stand firmly with Ukraine and against the tyranny of the Russian government. For that reason, I am proud to support this supplementary item. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. Gwynn. Our next speaker, Mr. Joe Giglio from Malta, to be followed by Ms. Kravchuk from Ukraine. Mr. Giglio, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Maltese delegation strongly endorses this supplementary item which has been put forward. It has been almost close to 1.5 years now since Russia's unwarranted and illegal aggression of Ukraine has taken place. Since then, we have met in Birmingham, Warsaw, Vienna, and now in Vancouver, and this Assembly has issued countless resolutions condemning this aggression. Malta, too, has not shied away from being vociferous in condemning the actions of the Russian state, and this notwithstanding the fact that we endorse the principle of neutrality and that we are a small island state. We have done so in various fora, when we had the presidency of the UN Security Council, in the EU Parliament, whose president happens to be a Maltese also. Malta has also invoked the Moscow mechanism, and we have provided shelter to Ukrainian refugees. We welcome the setting up of an ad hoc committee on Ukraine. This Assembly ought not and will not put aside from its agenda various other situations which have manifested themselves as a lack of adherence to the OSCE principles, and it is why we are strongly in favor of this supplementary item. We have seen situations which have evolved in Georgia, in the Crimea, in Moldova, in Armenia, and that is why we welcome the text of this resolution, which also makes references to them. We cannot also put aside and forget other issues that have developed, which is the enormous immigration crisis that has resulted. Being a country in the Mediterranean, we already face a very huge task in dealing with illegal immigration, but we will not shy away from putting forward our help to Ukrainian refugees. This aggression has also led us to understand that we need a stronger OSCE, one that is not hindered by consensus, an OSCE which can play a more important role, such as, for example, in overseeing the enforceability of sanctions that are imposed on countries that go away and go astray from the principles of the OSCE. Ultimately, I believe that this aggression has made us stronger, has served to unite us even more, and has served to help us understand the importance of keeping always our minds focused on the necessity to ensure that the OSCE principles are always adhered to. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Ms. Krovchuk from Ukraine, will be followed by Mr. Loperfido from Italy. Ms. Krovchuk, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, dear colleagues, dear Rapporteur. Thank you for this supplementary item. It's very important, and for Ukrainians that are fighting every day, it's important that neither assembly, neither all of your countries do not forget that it's been going on for 16 months now, the full-scale invasion, but it all started in 2014, as you rightfully mentioned, was the start of annexation of Crimea. We totally support your efforts and mentioning the ICC and the help to International Criminal Court, because what important that perpetrators and those who violate international law and rule-based order, they know that at the end they're going to be justice. And we would like to thank you also for supporting our supplementary item with the mentioning of creation of the International Ad Hoc Tribunal, because that's the part in the whole system that we are lacking, because we have to punish Russian Federation for the crime of aggression. Right now, ICC cannot go and investigate these crimes, so we have to establish an ad hoc tribunal to bring justice. And also, I have to say that our efforts in sanctions are still not enough, because Russia still have money and possibility to, for example, shell Ukraine with missiles that were made after 24th of February. So I urge you in all of your countries to close all of the loopholes, all of the cooperation with countries or companies that can transfer any of the technologies to Russian Federation. And they're poor with technologies, because that's why they have to beg Iran to give them drones, to send them to Ukraine. And also I call you to a bigger discussion about the reform of OSCE as such. We can see that Parliamentary Assembly at least can take some actions, vote for resolutions, discuss and say that black is black, white is white, wrong is wrong, good is good. But OSCE as such is blocked. And I urge you to talk to your national governments not to accept any compromise in 2024, saying that if Estonia is blocked, let's find another country. No, Estonia either has to be president, either we're gonna have to skip that idea of giving Russia another victory, how they say it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Loperfido from Italy, to be followed by Mr. Osuski from Slovakia. Mr. Loperfido, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Canadian friends and their organization, because in this crucial moment they have organized in an optimistic way, the optimal way, this session. And now I go back to the Italian language, that is the official, also an official language, as a state nation that has contributed to found the OSCE. Ieri abbiamo assistito alla festa del Canada, Canada che ha offerto tante opportunità a chi scappava dalla povertà, dalla guerra, e ha offerto questa opportunità di sviluppo soprattutto sotto l'ombrello della libertà e della democrazia, principi fondamentali che oggi vediamo violati nell'Ucraina a causa della inconcepibile aggressione da parte dello Stato russo. Ecco perché noi non possiamo che condividere la relazione, e ringraziamo la collega De Ridder che ci è appena stata sottoposta, e condividerla punto per punto, proprio perché abbiamo visto in questi mesi, e personalmente sono stato a Varsavia anche la scorsa settimana per il workshop sul traffico degli esseri umani, in particolar modo donne e bambini, quanto sta accadendo è veramente drammatico, e non ci può che vedere a fianco degli amici ucraini, a fianco di chi sostiene i principi dell'Assemblea OSCE, sin dal momento della sua fondazione. L'Italia lo sta facendo dal primo giorno della guerra, lo ha fatto quando c'era un altro governo, sta continuando a farlo perché l'Italia è sempre dalla parte della libertà, dei diritti, della democrazia. Quindi anche con il nuovo governo vogliamo essere al fianco di chi continua a cercare la libertà. Ecco allora che e vi ringrazio amici americani per quanto ha detto appena adesso il collega. E da questo punto di vista l'Italia è uno Stato fondatore, il sottoscritto abita in una regione, il Friuli Venezia Giulia, che ha vissuto con la cortina di ferro a 80 km da casa. Abbiamo avuto per tanti anni una piazza divisa in due, tra una parte del mondo e l'altra parte del mondo, divisa da dove c'erano diritti e dove non c'erano. Ecco allora che di fronte a questa situazione dobbiamo continuare sempre con questi principi del dialogo costante per cercare la pace, la democrazia e lo sviluppo economico di questi paesi. E per farlo questa Assemblea deve anche tenere in considerazione quanto abbiamo chiesto con una lettera, che deve assicurare la massima efficacia e efficienza senza avere delle vacanze nel momento in cui il giorno delle elezioni ci saranno 3 vicepresidenti che si candidano, e liberando un posto da vicepresidente chiederemo quindi di sostenere il quarto eventuale primo dei non eletti che possa entrare all'interno ovviamente del bureau dell'Assemblea. Io ringrazio e auguro agli amici ucraini di poter gioire già dall'anno prossimo del godere di tutti gli stessi diritti di libertà e democrazia.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Osuski from Slovakia, to be followed by Mr. Leconte from France. Mr. Osuski, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember in my memory on the February 24th, 2022 year in Vienna's Hofburg, it was the first day of this dramatic, tragic aggression of an OEC country member towards Ukraine. And I said at that time there is a need for democracies to press Russia into the knees. And it was then a very angry reaction of Comrade Tolstoy to this sentence. But I have to say we have to march this way step by step until there is not a victory of Ukraine accepted by Ukrainians present. To tell the truth, in the November session in Warsaw, I had a very sad impression of the development of OEC Parliamentary Assembly. I'm not sure how many of you had been there, but the reactions of democracies was clear, half of them clear on the way to make appeasement with evil. My country was a victim of such appeasement in Munich 38. And I call to all of us not become tired of support. Slovakia gave 3/4 of his army equipment to Ukraine, all our jet fighters and even all S-300 rockets. But so or so we have to produce and to deliver to Ukraine what they need. It means weapons, weapons, and weapons. And that's why I am somehow more optimistic hearing the supplementary item presented now, and I will of course vote for it, because the general atmosphere in this committee, which is an important committee of our institution, is much better than it was in Warsaw. So I hope, because I said at that time we are at crossroads of the future of this institution, because if we choose appeasement with evil, we will lose the right to exist as an institution. I hope we are now on a better way, but we should keep in mind what happened. In spring 2019, I was observer of election in Ukraine, the first round of Zelensky's election. And it was in state city of Bucha, together with my friend Sir John Whittingdale. And we have to keep in mind what happened there, who did it, and that is only result of this tragic war should be, as I said, victory of Ukraine and victory of democratic world at all. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. Now, I'll now recognize Mr. LeConte from France for 3 minutes. Sir, you're recognized.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, je souhaitais intervenir pour apporter mon soutien total tant au point additionnel de Madame de Rieder que au combat de l'Ukraine pour sa liberté, pour son indépendance, mais aussi finalement pour la défense des principes et des valeurs de l'OSCE. Jamais jusqu'à présent une guerre sur le territoire de l'OSCE n'a eu de conséquences aussi graves et l'OSCE, dans sa formation actuelle, n'a pas été en mesure de pouvoir répondre par le dialogue, comme ça a pu être fait dans d'autres situations, à la gravité et aux violations que cette agression de la Russie envers l'Ukraine engendre. Je voudrais en citer 3. D'abord, c'est cité dans ce point additionnel la question de la déportation des enfants, qui est absolument terrifiante lorsqu'on voit les conditions dans lesquelles ceci s'est déroulé et qui a été la source de l'inculpation du président Poutine par la Cour pénale internationale et du mandat d'arrêt qui le poursuit maintenant. Cette lutte, cette constatation doit nous conduire tous à lutter contre l'impunité, non seulement du président de la Fédération de Russie, mais de tous ceux qui sont dans la chaîne qui conduit à ces exactions. Je voudrais aussi signaler la gravité de la violation du mémorandum de Budapest, qui finalement conduit à rendre non crédibles tous les efforts politiques depuis 20 ans pour lutter contre la prolifération nucléaire. Parce que, bien entendu, l'Ukraine ne serait pas dans cette situation si elle n'avait pas accepté cette dénucléarisation. C'est un principe très grave, c'est une situation très grave pour l'avenir de la lutte contre la prolifération nucléaire. Enfin, malheureusement, depuis quelques semaines, et le président Zelensky a indiqué aujourd'hui ses craintes, la Russie a commis un écocide à Kakhovka, qui aura de conséquences lourdes, tant sur la vie dans cette partie de l'Ukraine que pour l'ensemble de l'écosystème local et européen. Bien entendu, pour toutes ces raisons, il est absolument indispensable de voter cette résolution, mais aussi d'apporter tout notre soutien à l'Ukraine, car c'est la victoire de l'Ukraine qui permettra la défense des principes de l'OSCE et qui permettra de sanctionner ces violations qui sont inqualifiables et qui ne peuvent être tolérées. Et pour que l'Ukraine parvienne à cette victoire, quels que soient les succès heureux qu'elle a pu engranger depuis le 24 février dans beaucoup de souffrances, il convient de lui donner encore plus de moyens pour qu'elle parvienne à défendre nos valeurs communes.
Thank you, colleagues, for the excellent interventions. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 7 valid amendments have been tabled, and copies of the amendments have been made available. As with the previous item, I will call the prosper of the amendment first, and then we'll call an opponent of the amendment and the sponsor of the underlying draft resolution. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. I ask speakers to observe a time limit of 1 minute so that we can get through these amendments. We are also required to vote on every paragraph to which there are no amendments. We will begin with paragraph 1. Is there anyone who is against paragraph 1? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 1, please raise your voting card. Any abstentions? Paragraph 1 is agreed to. I now call Mr. Podorayev from Ukraine to propose Amendment 1. Sir, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, this amendment reminds to all of us that Russian war of aggression against Ukraine started not February 24th of year 2022. It started since 2014. And it also stresses that Russian war of aggression against Ukraine violates all possible international acts and charters that lie in basement of United Nations organization, OSCE as an organization. It is very, I would say, necessary and important stresses for this text. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 1? So I would ask Dr. DeRitter for your opinion on Amendment 1.
Ich habe gegen die Ergänzung keinerlei Widerspruch einzulegen. Mich hat lediglich überrascht, dass der Passus, dass Russland Gründungsmitglied der OSZE und der KSZE ist, etwas überrascht. Umso schwerer wiegt ja der Verrat, den Russland an unseren Werten vorgenommen hat. Ich kann aber mit den vorgeschlagenen Änderungen gut leben. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 1 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against Amendment 1 please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 1 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 2 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 2 as amended, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of amendment or paragraph 2 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 2 as amended is agreed to. We will now vote on paragraph 3. Is there anyone against paragraph 3? Would all those in favor of paragraph 3 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 3 is agreed to. I now call Ms. Krovchuk from Ukraine to propose Amendment 2. You are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, in this amendment, we just want to clarify the terms that have to be used in the resolution. It's not about the geographical name, Crimean Peninsula. It actually has the administrative name. And also, we ask you to use the proper language, and in other places of the resolution I saw that we use this proper language, so we feel it's not the assault, it's a full-scale military invasion of Ukraine, and it has to be put in the text. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 2? What is Dr. DeRitter's opinion about the amendment?
No objections, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 2 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 2 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will those against please raise your voting card? And are there any abstentions? Amendment 2 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 4 as amended. Is there anyone against paragraph 4 as amended? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 4 as amended is agreed to. We will now vote on paragraph 5. Is there anyone against paragraph 5? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor, paragraph 5. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 5 is agreed to. I now call on Ms. Kravchuk from Ukraine to propose Amendment 3. You are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this amendment is for clarification and making sure that we say that not just in Irpin and Mariupol they committed war crimes. The crimes were committed in many other places. And also, I think it's worth changing, just saying that it's incompatible with the values and principles of OSCE, but also it violates international law, because when we go to the court, we will put that on the table, that they violated the principles and international law. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 3? The representative from Belgium is recognized for 1 minute.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, ce n'est pas pour m'opposer, mais je me pose la question de pourquoi est-ce qu'il faudrait supprimer la référence au groupe paramilitaire. Pour le reste, je suis entièrement d'accord, mais j'ai une interrogation sur ce changement-là. Peut-être que Madame Pipa pourrait expliquer cette raison-là.
Thank you. And what is Dr. DeRitter's opinion on the amendment?
Ich kann Herr Vorsitzender, die Bedenken des belgischen Kollegen sehr gut nachvollziehen. Ich hatte die gleichen, zumal wir gestern ja auch über die paramilitärischen Wagner-Gruppen hier intensiv diskutiert haben und deren Verhalten auch auf das Schärfste verurteilt haben. Die Streichung der paramilitärischen Gruppen ist für mich nicht nachvollziehbar. Gleichwohl sind die anderen Ergänzungen und Richtigstellungen, insbesondere auch sprachlicher Natur, sehr nachvollziehbar. Insofern weiß ich an dieser Stelle jetzt nicht, wie wir verfahren können. Ich würde darauf insistieren, dass die Wagner-Gruppen als paramilitärische Gruppen, denn die sind hier gemeint, im Text erhalten bleiben sollten.
Thank you. I should now put Amendment 3 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 3, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All those against, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? 2, 3. Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 6 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 6, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those in favor? Thank you. Abstentions? Paragraph 6 as amended is agreed to. I now call on Ms. Kravchuk from Ukraine to propose amendment number 4. You are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. We believe that it's important to acknowledge the results of the documented results of the Moscow mechanism, and I think it's very symbolical that it's Moscow mechanism, and it should be in the resolution. This report that was out on the 4th of May 2023 about the deportation of Ukrainian children to Russian Federation.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 4? Dr. DeRitter, your opinion.
No objection, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll now put Amendment 4 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 4, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those opposed? Thank you. Any abstentions? Amendment 4 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 7 as amended. Is there anyone against paragraph 7? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 7 as amended is agreed to. We now vote on paragraph 8. Is there anyone who is against paragraph 8? Please raise your voting card. Those in favor? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 8 is agreed to. I will now call on Mr. Wilson from the United States to propose Amendment 5 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 8. Mr. Wilson, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians. Sadly, war criminal Putin's murderous war against Ukraine bears the hallmarks of a campaign of genocide against the Ukrainian people. Russian dictator Putin and his murderous lieutenants openly use eliminationist rhetoric and policy declarations that call for the physical and cultural destruction of the Ukrainian nation and its people. In August 2021, war criminal Putin presented an essay untruthfully fabricating Ukraine did not exist, shamefully on the website Kremlin.com. Article 2 of the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crimes of Genocide lays out the definitions of genocide: killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a group, deliberately inflicting on a group conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical and destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Only one definition needs to be found for it to meet the status of genocide to be found. And at this time, I urge recognition and acceptance of this amendment. I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 5? Dr. DeRitter, your opinion on Amendment 5?
Mr. Chair, this is an excellent addition. I agree.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 5 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 5, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Amendment 5 is adopted. I now call Mr. Potorayev from Ukraine to propose Amendment 6. Mr. Potorayev, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Colleagues, this amendment turns our attention to the necessity of joint efforts of all international organizations, first of all, International Atomic Energy Agency, to normalize as it possible the situation in terminally occupied Zaporozhye nuclear power station, which, as we all know, illegally seized by Russian Federation. So please support this amendment, especially considering latest events in Zaporozhye nuclear power station.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 6? Dr. DeRitter, your opinion.
No objection, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 6 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 6, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Amendment 6 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 9 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 9, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraph 9 as amended? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 9 as amended is agreed to. We now are on paragraph 10. I understand there is an oral amendment. Would the representative from Latvia please state the amendment?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the amendment is proposed in relation to actually the status quo situation of occupied territories of Donetsk and Lugansk. There are no separatists whatsoever. It's the Russian Federation.
Excuse me, sir, would you just tell us what the amendment is, and I'll give you
Great.
time.
Well, it's entirely changing the paragraph. It would go as cited. Condemns the Russian Federation for the unlawful imprisonment of former employees of the OEC Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine and the prison sentences imposed on them without due process in occupied regions of Donetsk and Lugansk, and calls for their immediate release.
We're making sure we get this right. Okay, so changes criticizes to condemns, and then after without due process strikes that language, and then says in the occupied regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, and calls for the immediate release of, or for their immediate release. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that is the oral amendment. An oral amendment has been proposed in accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure. First, I will ask whether there's an objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there's any objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it falls. Is there any objection to this oral amendment? Seeing as no objection, we will proceed to consider the amendment in the same way other amendments. That is, we will hear from the prosper of the oral amendment, one speaker against the oral amendment, and the opinion of the author of the underlying resolution. We will then decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the oral amendment. I now call on the prosper of the amendment, Mr. Coles, to speak to the amendment. You are recognized for 1 minute, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I tried to already describe prior before citing the whole proposal, obviously the status quo situation since last year, September, where the Russian Duma illegally annexed these territories, there are no such a thing as Russia-controlled separatists. It's actually under the occupation of Russian Federation. So therefore, the responsibility on the imprisoned OEC mission employees falls on Russian Federation. So therefore, the OEC should demand the release of the OEC employees immediately and condemn such an action. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral amendment? Dr. DeRitter, your opinion on the amendment?
I accept the change proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put the oral amendment to the vote. All those in favor of the oral amendment, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The oral amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 10 as amended. Are there anyone who is against paragraph 10 as amended? Please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those in favor of paragraph 10 as amended? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 10 is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 11 and 12 together. Does anyone want to separate paragraphs 11 and 12? Yes. Representative from Belgium.
Sorry, I would like to have a separate vote on,
Okay.
on 11.
Right, so we'll first take paragraph 11. Anyone against paragraph 11, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 11, please raise your voting cards. Any abstentions? Paragraph 11 is, one abstention. Paragraph 11 is adopted. We will now consider paragraph 12. Anyone against paragraph 12, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 12? Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 12 is adopted. I will now call on Ms. Moore from the United States to propose Amendment 7 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 12. Ms. Moore, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I am offering this amendment on behalf of our distinguished colleague from the United States, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, a distinguished member of the Homeland Security and Judiciary Committees. While we're focused on Ukraine, I just wanted to, this paragraph notes that Ukraine is just the most recent example of Russia's aggression. We're thinking of the soft annexation of Belarus, the occupation of territory in Georgia, the support for separatists in Moldova and Syria, all bear scars of Moscow's appetite for expansion and exploitation. Meanwhile, inside the Russian Federation, indigenous nations, ethnic minorities, and vulnerable populations are routinely and systematically brutalized, the victims of decades, if not centuries, of an ongoing colonial legacy. It's no coincidence that Russia's elite ethnic minorities and indigenous peoples are the most likely to be conscripted into the Russian military and represent the bulk of casualties. And I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 7? Dr. DeRitter, your opinion on the amendment.
I support the change proposal explicitly, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will now put Amendment 7 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 7 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Anyone against? Abstentions? Amendment 7 is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 13 to 29 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? So we will take together paragraphs 13 through 29. Anyone against these paragraphs, please raise your voting card. All those in favor? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Seeing not, paragraphs 13 to 29 are agreed to. I propose now that we formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Will those against please raise their voting cards? And any abstentions? Thank you. The draft resolution as amended is adopted. We will now consider the draft resolution on the Republic of Moldova. I would now like to give the floor to the principal sponsor of the supplementary item, Mr. Barna from Romania. Mr. Barna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, the war of Russia in Ukraine, a blatant violation of the international order, poses a critical threat to the European security. This aggressive behavior, we all know it very well, is not recent and has a major negative impact on other partners as well, such as Georgia and the Republic of Moldova. Against this difficult political context, together with my colleagues from Republic of Moldova, we are sponsoring resolutions regarding the territorial integrity of this country and the Transnistrian settlement process. More than ever, it is clear that protracted conflicts, such as those in the Black Sea region, must be high on our agenda. Russia must abide by its international obligations, including respecting the territorial integrity of neighboring countries. We considered that we need to keep sending a strong political message in this regard. Our message would be in line with the OSCE commitment to attaining a peaceful, comprehensive, and sustainable solution to these conflicts. The solution will fully respect for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Republic of Moldova within its internationally recognized borders, with a special status for the Transnistrian region, while ensuring the viability of the reintegrated state. With our resolutions, we are recognizing the progress made so far by the Republic of Moldova and encouraging further decisive steps toward adopting democratic reforms and supporting the rule of law, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. At the same time, we are reaffirming the importance of settling protracted conflicts in the framework provided by the international norms and multilateral organizations, thus protecting peace and security. The OSCE mission in Moldova is doing a great job, and we are acknowledging this valuable work with our resolution. At the same time, we are urging Russia to finalize withdrawing its troops and ammunition, where the Republic of Moldova is committing to contribute to ensuring transparency of the removal and destruction of the Russian ammunition, weapons, and military equipment stored in the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova. Dear colleagues, we are witnessing today, during the biggest security crisis in Europe since World War II, we are witnessing that conflicts can escalate rapidly in aggression and war, millions of lives being disrupted as a result. Let's learn our previous lesson and take a very active approach towards solving all these pending issues that have the potential to pose serious threats to our common security. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, as we enter this period of debate, if anyone would like to register interest in speaking, please come to the podium as soon as possible. I have one speaker registered. The floor is now open for debate, and I will recognize Mr. Francesco Sobora from Canada. You are recognized for 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honor and privilege to speak on this resolution. Colleagues, I take the floor to speak in support, in full and unwavering support of the supplementary item on the Republic of Moldova. As the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine continues, Moldova is facing important humanitarian, economic, and security pressures. Nearly 110,000 refugees from Ukraine have relocated to Moldova since February 2022. As well, it has been reported that Russia is deliberately attempting to foment political instability in Moldova. I commend Moldova for its efforts to resist Russia's destabilization tactics and for its tireless work in supporting Ukrainian refugees. As Mr. Barney SI notes, the European Council granted Moldova EU candidate status just over a year ago. As part of the accession process, Moldova is pursuing an important series of reforms to fight against corruption and to strengthen support for democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental freedoms. Canada supports Moldova's efforts towards European integration and encourages its democratic reforms. This SI also recognizes the conflict in Transnistria continues to pose a serious threat to security and stability in the OSCE area. It reaffirms the commitment of OSCE participating states to attaining a peaceful, comprehensive, and sustainable solution to this protracted conflict with full respect for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Republic of Moldova within its internationally recognized borders. As I'm sure we all agree, upholding these principles is paramount to resolving this long-standing conflict. As parliamentarians of the OSCE participating states, it is important for us to fully support the work of the OSCE mission in Moldova to facilitate dialogue between the parties. The work of the OSCE mission in Moldova in this regard is today more important than ever, given the 5+2 talks are on hold because of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. In 2018, Canada was one of the co-sponsors of Moldova's resolution at the United Nations General Assembly calling for the complete and unconditional withdrawal of Russian troops from the Moldovan territory. This resolution was passed in the General Assembly by a wide margin. But as we know, the Russian troops have not left. As this SI urges, the Russian Federation must resume the withdrawal of its military troops and ammunition stockpiles from the territory of the Republic of Moldova in accordance with Moldova's constitutional provisions of neutrality and in line with the relevant 1999 OSCE Istanbul Summit decisions. Ties between Canada and Moldova are strong. In May, on her first official visit to Canada, President of Moldova, Maia Sandu, was welcomed by the Speaker of the House of Commons and met with members of the Canada-Moldova Parliamentary Friendship Group, which I am one, and also in my capacity as chair of the Canada-Europe Interparliamentary Association. On that occasion, Canada's support for Moldova's sovereignty was strongly reaffirmed. Our annual session gives us the opportunity to show our support for Moldova's reforms and our commitment to finding a peaceful solution to the conflict in Transnistria. It is important that these elements are reaffirmed in the Vancouver Declaration. I wish to thank Mr. Barna for putting a supplementary item forward, and I urge you all to support it. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Merci. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. One valid amendment has been tabled, and copies have been made available. As with the previous item, I will call the prosper of the amendment first, then we'll call for an opponent to the amendment, and then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution. Following that, I will put the amendment to the vote. I ask speakers to observe a time limit of 1 minute. We're also required to vote on every paragraph to which there are no amendments. We will begin with paragraphs 1 and 2. Does anyone want a separate vote on either of these paragraphs? So we'll take paragraphs 1 and 2 together. Is there anyone against paragraph 1 and 2? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor, paragraph 1 and 2. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 1 and 2 are agreed to. We'll now call on Mr. Cardin from the United States to propose Amendment 1 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 2. Mr. Cardin, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really want to thank our colleagues from Romania for bringing forward this supplementary item. The site being so close to the war and with Russian troops on its soil, Moldova has shown courage and leadership in opposing Russia's brutal war in Ukraine and opening its doors to the Ukrainian people. No country has harbored more Ukrainians per capita during this conflict than Moldova. And as already noted, it's important to recognize the reformist government has helped to make the country freer and create new opportunities for its people. Fittingly, it was granted candidate status by the European Union last year, along with Ukraine. Moldovan people have stood tall for their Ukrainian brothers and sisters, and they deserve this Assembly's recognition and gratitude. The amendment that I have brought forward is explicit in those areas. I urge my colleagues to support it.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 1? And what does, Mr. Barna, what is your opinion of the amendment?
Since I also signed the amendment, I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, I shall put the amendment to a vote. All those in favor of Amendment 1, please raise your voting card. Thank you. All those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 1 is adopted. We'll now come to paragraphs 3 to 15. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs 3 through 15? Okay, so we will take paragraphs 3 to 15 together. Is there anyone against paragraphs 3 to 15? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor, paragraphs 3 to 15. Thank you. Any abstentions? So paragraphs 3 through 15 are agreed to. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise their voting cards. All those in favor. Thank you. Will those against please raise their voting card? And any abstentions? The draft resolution as amended is adopted. Thank you, dear colleagues. That concludes our business for this afternoon. We are ahead of schedule, but we have done really good work today. I'm proud of this organization, this committee, and thank you all for your full participation. We will continue our consideration of supplementary items tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We stand adjourned. Thank you.